end of the day, it's really what you're learning and how much knowledge you have. And you can show that in other ways. You don't have to show that purely through a grade point average.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the STEMPOWER podcast. Our guest for this episode is Kelsey Doerksen, an engineer, entrepreneur, and aspiring astronaut who is currently working as a space systems engineer in San Francisco. So welcome to the podcast, Kelsey.
Thanks very much for having me.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I guess, yeah, you hit all the marks there. So my official title is Space Systems Engineer, but I am also a satellite operator is what I do day-to-day job.
All right, so to start, what career did you think you were going to have as a teenager?
I definitely waffled between pursuing like the role of being an astronaut in the future or going into medicine. Mm-hmm. I didn't know which one I wanted to choose really, but I just love space. It's very cool. I think a lot of us can agree with that.
Yeah,
and yeah, I mean, I've always really, really loved science. I had really great science teachers in elementary school that would, make like extra projects and things for me because I was just really, really into science. So I'm really thankful for having people like that in my life to kind of push me into the direction of pursuing a STEM career. So yeah, I kind of just always wanted to be an astronaut, to be honest. I ended up deciding really in like grade 11 or so that this was the time to kind of take all my science courses, like my chem, my physics, biology, etc., and to apply to engineering programs and just go from there.
Wow, all right. Yeah, a lot of other people that we've spoken to have also said that they wanted to be an astronaut, and that's what led them into the STEM field, which is, maybe we have to start thinking about being astronauts as well. So you work in, or at least you studied aerospace, right?
Yes, I studied aerospace engineering.
So what exactly piqued your interest in aerospace, like between high school and university?
Definitely. Really, I just didn't really know what to do. I think a lot of students and high school students especially have the same thing, right? You're supposed to decide what your career is going to be for the rest of your life while you're 16, 17 years old. So yeah. I knew that I liked space. I knew that I wanted to do something, whether that be an astronaut or just do something in the field of space. And I thought, well, astronauts probably have aerospace engineering degrees, so maybe I should just apply to do that. I always like I mentioned, I always liked science. I didn't like get the greatest grades in high school, I would say. I think that's one thing to kind of mention as well. Like you don't have to be like a math genius or a science genius to pursue like an engineering field at all.
Yeah, so we saw through your website that you spent a summer at the Paris Observatory. So how did you find that summer program?
Yeah, definitely. So actually, I had a friend of mine who was sort of like a mentor for me when I was in university. He was a few years older than me, and I really just asked him for a lot of guidance like throughout my university career when I had questions about projects or like what should I do with my life. Seemed like a really successful guy, and he continues to be. So he ended up just sending me a link to it. He had known that I was interested in all things space, so he really just sent me a link. But to be honest, a lot of the like extracurriculars outside of the university that I went to, I just Google things, to be honest. I really just Googled like summer space programs for I'm an undergraduate or I'm a master's student, etc. And just go from there and just kind of like comb through Google because there's tons of stuff and it's often not very well advertised, especially the Paris one. Because it was the first time they were running the program, they had a lot of French students there, but not a lot of international, just because they hadn't had, the program to like in the past to be able to spread the word with other students. So yeah, it's really just like the power of Google, honestly, and stuff like that. So that's how I found the summer program there.
Also, you actually had the experience of attending the Paris Observatory program for like the first time, like kind of the test subject.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I never ran it. which is cool because I got to come back again then as a teacher for last year's summer school. So they run it every 2 years, and it's a 1-week program for undergraduates and masters and PhDs. So upper level undergraduates and masters and first year PhD students as well.
Okay, so what exactly did you learn during your time as a student?
Yeah, so there's 3 different, I guess, topics that you can focus on at the school. It's near Earth objects, so things like asteroids, space debris, which was what I focused my time at the school doing, and space weather as well, which I also spent some time doing. So you get to do, the first couple days are lectures where you have, teachers from all around the world. We had people from NASA there, we had people from the observatory, and all over the world kind of sharing their expertise with us. And then the last 3 days of the school, you basically split into your 3 different topics, depending on what you decided you want to work on. And you get to do labs. Last summer, we did like observations at night to try to see if we can see any near Earth objects, and things like that. So it was really cool. And then the last day, you basically come together with your group and present your findings to the rest of the groups that were focused on the other 2 topics. So it's a great way to be able to like intensely study one topic, and also learn other things as well at the same time, which is cool.
That's cool. So how do you say that your experience there contributes to where you find yourself right now?
Honestly, it changed my life completely. It really, really did. I'm so thankful. My friend ended up like sending me that link just on a whim.
Yeah.
It really did change my life. I mean, I had never traveled abroad before. So the one thing really great about the school is that all you have to do is pay for the flight and the application fee. So once you get to Paris, they'll pay for all your food and your hotel and the actual school program. So for someone like, I didn't come from a very like wealthy background, so I wouldn't be able to otherwise kind of afford to be able to do this opportunity. So I think that's one thing that's really great about the program, is it allowed me to be able to go to Europe and expand my knowledge and things. Like, I had no idea what space weather was before I attended that school, and that's what I ended up returning there the following year to do an internship, and then the year after that to be a teacher at the summer program. So, and I still keep in contact. I was just speaking with the 2 lead program, I guess, managers of that program the other day, actually. We're still very close. We worked together on my master's thesis. They're like dear friends of mine. Yeah, it really changed my life. I mean, you never know. That's why I kind of just take these opportunities as I can, and I try to apply as many things as possible. And yeah, it absolutely changed my life, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity that I got to go there, for sure.
So I guess you would definitely say that the Paris Observatory experience was one of the factors that contributed to you getting an internship at NASA, right? So what would you say were some other contributing factors to getting that internship?
For sure. I think one thing to note is luck plays a huge role in things like this, right? You're going to have hundreds of, if not thousands of people apply to internships or programs like this every year. So you do have to take that into consideration too. Even the most well-qualified people won't get into certain things like that. So that's one thing, like, take your failures in stride. For me, I think a lot of it had to do with the extracurriculars that I had and the experience I had. So I did at Carleton University, where I did my undergraduate degree. I was one of the founding members of the Carleton Planetary Robotics team. So we were a team of students that build a Mars rover every year, and we do international competitions. And the internship at NASA was to work on Mars rovers. So I already had experience that led me to be able to, be an active member and participant, a part of that internship. The program I was able to, I get this question a lot. So the program I entered through NASA because I'm a Canadian citizen. I entered the program called the JVSRP, which I believe stands for the Jet Propulsion Lab Visiting Research Scholar Program, something along those lines. But essentially, it is when your university partners with someone at NASA to be able to basically fund your internship. So Western University, where I did my master's degree, had a connection at NASA, and through that connection, I was able to get an internship because of my experience, but also, again, this is just luck that I ended up being a student at the time they had this connection, and that's how I started at NASA. But I mean, I didn't start I didn't have any coding experience before I started my master's, and my internship at NASA was software engineering. So I was lucky to have had a year of coding experience in my master's before applying to this internship. So that definitely helped a lot as well. So kind of being like interdisciplinary as an engineer was definitely really important to being able to get that internship.
I see. So how does, between your experience as an intern and as a student, how do the two compare, and how are the benefits, how are they different?
For sure. I think one thing, it depends, of course, where you do your internship, but for both internships I had, one at the Paris Observatory and one at NASA, it was very hands-off in that I was able to make mistakes and really I was able to work on actual hardware at the Jet Propulsion Lab. They gave myself and my colleague of mine who went at the same time as me to do the internship, they basically gave us a bunch of equipment worth like a lot of money, more money than I've ever seen. And we're like, okay, can you build this rover wheel for us? Because we need to like test it in a couple weeks. So that was really cool to just be given kind of like the autonomy to be able to make decisions and make mistakes, but also learn from them as well. And it's nice just to like fully immerse yourself in one project. Whereas being a student, of course, you're kind of spread quite thin, right? Especially in undergraduate degree, you have so many classes, you're taking 5 or 6 classes at a time. They're all very different subjects. So you don't have time to really focus on one specific project. So that's what I really liked about being an intern, was that I get to spend all my time just focusing on one project. I didn't have to do tests as well. I don't like tests. One benefit for sure. But I loved being a student. I think that's, you get so many opportunities to join different like clubs, collaborate with different people. So that's one thing that's nice too. You get to go to like conferences and stuff like that and meet students from other universities. So that's a huge benefit that I would encourage anyone to do as well, is to try to learn from other students in different programs and, you know, try to figure out what the best path for yourself is in your career.
All right, yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to not liking tests. I don't think that's a very popular subject among students. But back to what you said about the rover wheel. So we saw on your website one of the projects that you had that you partook in as a NASA intern was the Barefoot Rover project. So can you just give us like a quick summary of what exactly that was and what part you played in that project?
Yeah, for sure. So the Barefoot Rover project is essentially, we had this really big rover wheel. So you can think of it almost the size of a car wheel, for example. So we basically had this big rover wheel, and outside of the wheel, we wrapped a pressure pad around the outside of it. And essentially what we tried to do was use machine learning to be able to detect subsurface rocks using a rover wheel, determine what type of terrain the rover was actually rolling across. So was it very coarse sand? Was it very soft sand? And to be able to detect the amount of slip that a wheel is going under. So essentially slip, you don't want your wheel to have too much slip because it can get stuck in sand, for example. And that's what happened to one of the rovers on Mars in the past. So the idea was to be able to use these pressure pad readings on the outside of your wheel to infer this type of information, so that in the future, we can use these types of rover wheels on future Mars rover missions, so that your rover can basically traverse across Mars or the Moon, for example, without having to worry about getting stuck or damaging its wheel if it like rolls on top of a sharp rock and things like that. So the idea was to be able to make your rover wheel smarter, so to speak. My specific role, so I was with another colleague of mine, Alexis Pasquale. We're both from Western University, and our job was to build the rover wheel and to test it. So we not only built it with the machinery, but we also tested it. So we rolled it on top of different types of terrain. And then we used that data as well to basically improve the machine learning algorithms that some of the former NASA employees had already written to be able to classify the types of terrain and the amount of slip as well. So it was really cool. We got to do not only building it, but data collection as well as like data analytics too, which I think is pretty rare in an internship to be able to do kind of all three of those things.
That sounds like a really cool project. So this reminds me, are there any other projects that you are really proud of or that are really memorable to you, or which one would you say is your favorite?
Oh, it's hard to pick a favorite for sure. I think, okay, if I had to pick a favorite, it would be the Carleton Planetary Robotics team, just because we started it from nothing. We had no funding from the university. We had no idea what to do. And now the team, competes every year internationally, and they do quite well. So I'm really proud of that team for sure. And it was just such a fun project to work with students from all across the engineering disciplines at Carleton. I also really enjoyed our CubeSat project. So that was my final year, like our capstone 4th year engineering project we did at Carleton as well. And that's really fun too, because you get to work on one specific subsystem, but you get to interface with all different, disciplines of engineering. So we worked with mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and all the people across the aerospace program as well. So, but I would say probably the Carleton Planetary Robotics team, just because it's one thing that like we started from nothing, and it's been really successful, and it's really fun. I have like lifelong friends from that for sure.
That's really cool. So you currently work at Planet. So tell us a little bit more about Planet, what the company is, what does it do, and what specific role you play within this company.
Sure. So Planet is a San Francisco-based company. We operate the largest Earth observation satellite constellation in the world. So essentially, we have a large fleet of satellites that image the entire Earth every single day. And the idea is that we provide data in the form of images to be able to make insights into agricultural health, for example, disaster management, like forest fire management or drought management, et cetera. And the idea is to really use space to help life on Earth. So we're using images we take from space to be able to make informed decisions here on Earth. So that's really cool. I really like the idea of being able to work in aerospace and the space industry while still benefiting humanity here on Earth, because this is ultimately where we live and our home. We should take care of it. And plus, working in Earth observation, I get to look at beautiful images every single day. That's really a good perk as well. So my role is I'm a satellite operator. So we have two types of satellites at Planet. We have our Dove constellation, which is our smaller CubeSat size satellites, and we have our SkySats, which are a bit larger of a satellite, and they take higher resolution imagery. So I operate our Dove constellation. So we have hundreds of doves in orbit, and essentially my job is to make sure that they're operating effectively. So how I do that is I write a lot of Python code to automate our operations, because our team is quite small. We only have, I believe there are 4 operators plus a manager in San Francisco and 3 operators plus a manager in Berlin.
Oh, wow.
There's hundreds of satellites, right? So we need to make sure we have automations in place so that if there are, issues where, for example, like the power is too low, can we automatically set something off so the satellite can kind of mitigate the problems it has itself without us having to interfere specifically. And I also use a lot of the data we collect from the satellite's telemetry to be able to basically infer the health of the satellite constellation, make sure it's performing effectively. Are there any things we could change that make it perform a little bit better, and basically just maintain the health of the satellites overall.
So what are some problems that you have encountered when operating satellites, or what are some common issues or perhaps not so common issues that you've had to sort of overcome?
I don't know how much I can specifically talk, just because of the restrictions, but I think just something to I guess that is in general across like the space industry is if you have launch delays, which can affect operations. So, if we have, for example, 25 or 30 satellites that are supposed to launch on January 1st, and it gets pushed back until, apologize, you can hear that.
No worries.
You have something that's supposed to launch January 1st, and it gets pushed back even, a couple weeks or a month. How is that going to affect the overall coverage that your satellites are now able to provide, right? So the whole goal with Planet is to image the entire Earth every single day. So it's important that we're able to, have satellites everywhere taking pictures all the time. So if you have launch delays, that can make it more difficult if you're relying on those satellites to cover certain areas. So that's when you kind of need to rethink how can you maximize the productivity of the satellites you have in orbit. So that's definitely one thing that's a challenge. And just in general, having to maintain hundreds of satellites, I think is just a daily challenge, and there's only so many of us. So keeping track of if there are issues and if this is an issue we've seen before, How did we mitigate it in the past? If this is a new issue, what can we try to fix it? I can't really talk specifics, but I
No
hope
worries. All right, so for your job at Planet, what did your day-by-day look like before the pandemic started, and how has that changed since the pandemic started?
So I started at Planet in February of this year, so essentially
Wow.
right before the pandemic hit. I moved to the US, which was an interesting time. So I really only had about a month or so in the office. So I've actually spent more time working from home than not working from home. But the really cool thing about my team in general is that we're very remote friendly. So we have, on our San Francisco based team, we have our manager is in Seattle, one of our operators is in Texas, the other operator is in Canada, and then two of us are in San Francisco. So even though our team is technically based in San Francisco, we're very remote friendly, which is really cool. So it hasn't affected my day-to-day too much, to be honest. I definitely was really excited about working kind of in like the space startup in the Silicon Valley, lifestyle you hear about, or if you've seen the show as well. It does kind of live up to the hype for sure. It's quite funny, we're walking your first day and we have kombucha on tap and things like that. It's like exactly what you see on the movies, which I thought was really cool because I've never kind of worked in that environment. So, I mean, that's, of course, my work environment is a bit different physically, but honestly, my day-to-day hasn't been affected too much because most of my job is just working on a computer anyways. I don't really use any hardware. And our team has adapted really nicely. So we still have like Zoom meetings. We even have like Zoom office hours where people can just connect in and chat. You don't have to have specific questions. So I'm lucky that my job has not only been sustained throughout COVID, but it hasn't really changed too much, which is really nice.
So you mentioned that you really enjoy seeing all these beautiful pictures that are taken by satellites. What would you say is your favorite part about working at Planet?
I think my favorite part about working at Planet is that the work you're doing is impactful, not only from a perspective of using space to help life on Earth, but the work I'm doing as a new engineer. I mean, this is my first industry job. The work I'm doing, I know is actually impacting the company, which is really cool. It's like half scary because you're like, oh my God, this work is actually important. It's also really cool because I feel like it's quite rare for someone so young in their career to already be making like these pretty impactful decisions in the company. So for example, I'm commissioning a future launch in the next few months or so. And I haven't even been here a year, and I'm going to be one of the people in charge of actually like commissioning our satellites, which means basically once they launch, making sure their satellites, the panels are deployed and they're getting all the telemetry down. So it's really cool that, I mean, I've been able to write code and deploy it to all of our ground stations. So like all of our ground stations are using it, and our satellites are using the code I wrote. So it's really, really cool. I think that's one of my favorite parts about working at Planet is you immediately get to contribute, which I think, of course, I can't speak to other companies. I haven't worked at other companies, but I think it's quite rare for someone so young to be able to kind of make these impactful engineering decisions. So it's very cool. I'm very thankful.
Yeah, I think it's super impressive that someone as young as yourself is already doing so much in like the space industry, and you're someone that I think a lot of people can really admire. So just to finish off,
what are some of your future ambitions?
Future ambitions. So right now, actually, I am applying to PhD programs, which is always a stressful and exciting time. So kind of my ideal goal is to be able to use Earth observation imagery to assist with climate change impact. So, using the images we get from these types of Earth observation satellites and be able to see if we can predict the onset of a drought, for example, and how that would impact a region. I think one thing for me really is I want to be able to do research or at least work in a career that is impactful and giving back. Like I did mention, I kind of waffled between going into medicine and going to space. Whereas, medicine, if you're a doctor, you can see the patients every day and you can kind of feel that impact that way. So I wanted to be able to still get that kind of fulfillment out of my career in space industry as well. So applying to PhDs, the goal is to kind of work as well as pursue that. So kind of just doing that every single day, looking at PhD programs and writing applications, things like that. I'm definitely still working towards being an astronaut, but I'm not as, I guess, obsessed with it, for lack of a better word, as I used to be. More so just because I think it's important to enjoy your life. That's one thing I really want to kind of iterate, I guess, is I focus so much on, what can I do that would make me an attractive applicant to an astronaut program? And I don't think that's necessarily the best way to go about it. I think it's important to enjoy what you're doing and, try a bunch of different things for sure. But yeah, at the end of the day, you want to kind of enjoy what you're pursuing. So I think what I'm doing is still kind of working towards it, but not so much as in I have to hit like these really hard set deadlines I impose on myself. I'm just kind of taking it day by day, especially, with the current climate of the world and COVID and things like that. Just trying to take it day by day and learn as much as possible. So it's kind of where I'm at right now.
I see. So last question before we finish off this episode. If you could give yourself one piece of advice in one sentence, what would that be? Your high school self.
Ooh, that's a good one. Don't stress about your grades. That would be a good one for sure. I mean, I'm kind of going off, but the grades are definitely important for sure for certain things, but at the end of the day, it's really what you're learning and how much knowledge you have. And you can show that in other ways. You don't have to show that purely through a grade point average. So I think that's something to think about. Don't stress too much about, I mean, I'm going to say it first, like I'll be the first one to say I've definitely failed tests in university. I've gotten 50s on exams I've tried. I've done well as well, but to get where I am, but grades aren't everything. So I think that's important to think about. I've stressed a lot about grades.
I think that's a really good piece of advice that a lot of students would be useful to students. So thank you so much for joining us today on the STEMPOWER podcast, and we hope that you and our listeners have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for having me.